One of the occupations Jim has had over the years is to be a photographer at a dirt track for race cars. Jim was on his way home from this dirt track job and had a cooler in the back of his vehicle. And Jim went through an intersection and there were blue lights in the back window. Jim knew he hadn't been speeding. Thought maybe because the late hour, it was about 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning. Maybe he had been sleepy and swerving, so he pulled over. An officer, a Department of Transportation officer, not a state trooper or county sheriff or anything, came up to Jim's car and wanted to know where he had been. Jim told him he had been at work at the dirt track. He asked, did I mind if I looked in the cooler? I said, no, there's just some melted ice and a couple of Gatorade bottles in there. So he opened it and looked. Jim has mentioned before on the channel that he is diabetic. So in the seat next to Jim was a syringe and some insulin bottles. And so immediately this seemed to have gotten the Department of Transportation officer's attention. He asked me what those were. I handed it to him. He read the bottle and looked at the syringe and took him back to his car and, got Jim's license and did all that stuff that they do. He went to, came back, asked me if I'd been drinking, asked, why I had the syringe in the car, and I explained to him, you read the bottle, I'm diabetic, that's my insulin, and, again, he was wanting to know about the cooler, had I been anywhere, had I been drinking any alcohol, and I said, no, dirt track, gets hot, drink Gatorade, tried to explain that all to him again. And there were two of them. There was what I'm guessing was a training officer and a younger officer. And so they kept questioning Jim about where he lived, what he was doing out at 1:30 in the morning, and all kinds of other questions. And then again, they went back to their car for a while. And Jim, as easily as he could, reached over beside him in the seat and got ready to call up his brother on his cell phone, and called his brother and told him, said, hey, dude, you might have to come get the truck because I'm not sure I'm not, going to wind up going to jail tonight. And my brother's like, what for? I said, well, best I can tell, driving home too late. That seems to be, the main concern. I said there was a, concern with my insulin and the fact that I had a cooler in the back of the truck. My brother worked at the dirt track with me. And so he was sort of laughing and snickering. He said, I've never had that happen to me. And I said, well, I've never had it happen to me either. But the worst things I've had happen to me on the way home is there is a roadblock at this particular intersection that I got stopped at quite often. And usually the thing that always tickles Jim is they'll pull him over and they'll come up and they'll say, whatever vehicle Jim happens to be driving, they're like, we heard there was a blue truck, causing some mischief. There was a green van we heard, was driving around the neighborhood real slow, looking at houses and everything. They always had some excuse why they had to pull Jim over, and Jim thinks it was just so they could check his license and, make sure he hadn't been drinking. I don't know why they just can't come out and say that, say, hey, we're doing a sobriety checkpoint. But no, they always have to make up some kind of crazy excuse and reason. So anyway, back to my original story. The two officers came back, Jim's truck, handed him his license, said, have a good night and, have a safe trip home. No, we're sorry for pulling you over. No, anything. Just, sort of said, hey, it's like nothing happened. You have a good trip home. So anyway, that's Jim's story about him and the Department of Transportation officers and the fun he has trying to get home sometimes.